I'll go ahead and get started then. So thank you all for coming here. I'm here to present the title right there. I'm going to talk about this ABT dashboard, which is an application that I built that uses data from GVE and 25 Live to kind of streamline our process in AV. So I'll go ahead and get into that. So I'm Landon Brewster. My title is essentially a fancy way to say I'm an AV technician from Pepperdine University. And right in that picture there, you can see where we are. We're on the coast in Malibu. It's a pretty good view. That's just one of our campuses. I'll get into it later, but we actually have about 5 campuses that are not considered abroad campuses. So those are campuses that we support and are expected to maintain their AV. So Pepperdine, we have about 9,000 students. That's including graduate and undergrad colleges. And then we have 6 colleges which are part of that. So there's Seaver, which is our undergrad school. That's what we spend most of our time with. There's the School of Law, PGBS, GISEP, SPP, and PCHS. So we support all of those colleges, excluding the School of Law. That one has their own tech team and their own issues. They follow their own standards. So our team, we have one manager who oversees currently 3 AV technicians, and we are responsible for AV requests, so that can include supporting an event, running a mixer for an event, a live stream, setting up speakers. We're also responsible for classroom support, and that'll be mostly what I talk about here today. So all of our classrooms, we are trying to make sure that they are 100% functional all the time, and that can be difficult considering the size of the school and the number of technicians we have and the space between each campus. And then our third responsibility, which is a fun side project, is our AV refresh / AV projects, where we occasionally refresh a number of rooms, or we'll be consultants for a new project that's putting AV somewhere in there. So we provide support for 5 of the colleges. That's 5 out of the 6, and we have about, the number isn't exact, but it's at least 185 distinct rooms with AV systems. And of course, that's going over 5 unique campus locations. So those are, I'll get in the picture here. So they're 5, and they're spread across kind of a large location. I wish my laser, you can't really see my laser there, but on the leftmost section, I'll just use my mouse, that might help. So this is Malibu. That's where we're mostly based. And we have our Seaver and Drescher campuses there. But outside of that, there's Calabasas, which is roughly 20-30 minutes from Malibu. There's West LA, which it varies on traffic, but it could be an hour 30 minutes from Malibu. And then way down here is Irvine, which is 3 hours. So what I'm trying to convey here is that we support all of these campuses, so we try to have a solution for supporting all of them while not having the capability to drive back and forth between every campus every time someone thinks there's an issue, or we try to reduce the issues before they come up, because we don't want to drive from Malibu, that's where we're based out of, to Irvine whenever something breaks. And then on average, we get 900 AV issue tickets every year. So we have to find a way to resolve them or lower that count as much as we can in a smart way. So right here, I was trying to convey our typical workflow or some context over our institution, that we use Extron. That's our #1 AV system, excluding the School of Law. And then we have 4 outlier systems that use other technology. And then as of 2025, there was a big project that completed in that year where most of our rooms are networked in the sense that only the controller of the AV system is on our enterprise network. So it can be accessed from anywhere within the Pepperdine network. And then lastly, we use Extron GVE. If you aren't aware, it is a tool for managing networked AV systems at scale. And then I was just adding another slide here for the Pepperdine, that our specific network configuration, I'll say. Due to various conditions from our networking team and our security team, we only connect the controller and maybe a navigator, if you can consider that a controller. That's the AV over IP controller, to the Pepperdine network. So every other device is restricted to an isolated network that we cannot reach from our network. So that limits the way that we can connect to our devices. Our cameras, for example, if you could connect to them, you could get a live camera feed. which would help, but we are not allowed to connect them due to various restrictions. So we have to work around that. And my solution, my dashboard that I'll get into, is built in a reaction to that. So then our call workflow, one of our major key duties is we have this hotline phone call where we create a ticket every time we get the call, and these are just meant to be just for just-in-time, immediate, urgent AV issues. So the caller calls the support line, they describe the issue, of course, and then we try to resolve it. And ideally, if possible, we try to resolve it remotely, because if we have to walk to a location, we're wasting time. And there is Global Viewer, just for reference. You can see it's kind of hard to see, it has a lot going on there, but we can use that to remotely log into a touch panel. And if you click into the touch panel, you can we've programmed it to give us input signal status. So if someone calls us, they're saying their screen is black, we're kind of somewhat blindfolded. So this is a helpful tool where we can try to guess what's going on based off of the status of the touch panel. Such as if they're saying they plugged in their laptop, but they don't see it on the screen, we can see from this screenshot they did not select the laptop option, they selected the PC. So that avoids a trip. But there is an issue with this workflow where we are relying on the caller's ability to describe the issue, which usually means that we have to go in person. There are so many issues where a caller says their screen is blue, and they don't give us any more description than that, which could mean anything. Maybe their background is blue, maybe the projector is just giving them a blue image, who knows? So it's a reliance that we are trying to get away from. And there we go. So we're relying on word of mouth to be alerted of AV issues, and then also to try to diagnose the issues remotely, which causes problems. There we go. We get delayed response, relying on the user's ability. They're not usually tech savvy enough to describe what's happening, and they get a poor user experience in the sense that we only fix an issue as the users find it. So obviously their experience is poor. So I'll move on to my solution to this, which was the AVT dashboard. I was going to start with a little short introduction to it, then a live demo, and then after that, I would move on to the technical hurdles of getting it to work. But at a glance, it is something that uses Extron GVE and pulls all the data, and I've built it into a standalone desktop application, and it just reports data off of it. I won't get too far into it now, but you'll see that we have every room listed, and there is a little key on the top right. And you can see if a room is offline, if there is a detected issue, which is based off of the device connection status, and so forth. So now, with the hotline call, now that we have the dashboard, the workflow changes somewhat, where we can, if we are getting a hotline call, we can use this dashboard instead of GVE to use that touch panel control. Because when you click on, I'll show you later, but if you click on one of these buttons here, maybe I can highlight it with my mouse. Just take my word for it. You actually get a auto-logged-in sequence that takes you to the Extron touch panel, which is faster than the GVE website. So that's a quicker way to do it. And you can also see if there's any detected issues. So if someone's calling, they're saying the projector isn't working, you can see from the AVT dashboard if the projector is reporting as disconnected, connected, if there is a projector in that room. And then the second thing, which might be the more important one, is that we actually get notifications immediately when an issue is detected. So again, the major thing that it can detect is disconnection. So if a projector goes offline, if a room goes offline, we are immediately alerted because we have this application running on a TV 24/7. It actually gives us audible alerts when something goes offline. So we'll be sitting in the office and we'll see TAC 180, projector offline. And then we know before anyone else that something went wrong. And we can fix it before any user finds out that there was ever an issue, which of course improves their overall experience. And then the issue, what I'm going into here is that it cannot detect every single issue. It's mostly just connection issues. So let's say if there was a projector that had a flickering video or something along those lines, where it's like an intermittent issue, but the device is still reporting as connected. In those circumstances, we still are relying on word of mouth to be alerted of those rooms. So here I'll get into the live demo. So here's the AVT dashboard. This is running. I have to use a VPN to access it because of the network constraints that we have. But we can see in the key here, we have a couple options. Black is room offline. Red, flashing red, means there are devices in that room reporting as disconnected. Green is in use, and yellow is in use, but there is no matching scheduled event on 25 Live, which is our scheduling service. And then blue means there's something scheduled, but they're not using the AV. Not using the AV. So right now, this is actually a great time to show you this because we're undergoing our AV refresh. So we have a bunch of rooms offline. If we did this a month ago, about every room would be online without issues. But now we see all these issues. Excuse me. So right now we can see, these 4 rooms in Calabasas that are offline. These 2 we know are intentionally offline. And all these rooms that are offline really are rooms that should be offline other than the Calabasas one. But I'll jump into the Elkins one here. I'll just click on this. Elkins is one of our, if not the largest auditorium we have. And we can see that it has an issue right now where the mixer is disconnected. And I have to shout out Extron a little bit here because they made us a custom driver that reports the connection status for that mixer. The driver that they didn't originally have that. So now we know that mixer is disconnected. So the way this room is set up, that means that it's not reset when you start the system. So there's a potential for an error. If someone's trying to start a class and the mixer has everything turned down, they're not going to hear anything. So we would want that to be connected, of course. But now we know, without someone needing to go in person to investigate the room, that it's disconnected. And then really the cool thing here, there's nothing scheduled, so I feel I'm going to mess around with this, is that this is a live connection to the Elkins system. So if you'll take my word for it, this is actually turning on the AV system there, which I think is really cool. This is going to take a while, though. Sorry? Probably not. I should have done that. That would be good. That would be good. I'll show you just in a second. We have another room that I can prove it. So anyways, we can see we got a live connection and so forth. And then if we toggle the view here, we can see the schedule, but there's nothing scheduled today, so it's not really interesting. And on this right panel here, this is the device status, which is being pulled from the GVE API. So if you scroll through here, everything that is online, you have no issues with that. We have the lamp hours. And then the mixer is offline, so that's an issue we need to look into. And so then the next thing I want to look into, actually no, I'll always save that for last. So I'll go to a room here that actually has schedule data. Let's look at CCB245. So this room is in use, so I'm not actually going to touch anything. But this has a connection to 25 Live. So on this top, we have a schedule here. This blue means that there is something, there are 2 timelines. This blue means that there's something scheduled, and this top timeline is the record of the actual room usage. So we can see something is scheduled and the room is in use. So that's great. There's no issue there. But if we go to a different room, let's say KSC 110, looks like they turned it on a little bit early for their class. But I like to have this statistic just because it tells us if a room is meant to be in use. There was a very frequent issue when I first built this where I found that, I don't have the statistic, but a very large number of our rooms were just being left on after the last class at 2 p.m. and they wouldn't auto shut off until 11 p.m. So that's about, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but that's at least 7 hours roughly of wasted lamp hour usage every day, potentially, which is ruining your systems. So thanks to this, that we could actually see that and track the usage, and then we made some changes in the programming so it would auto shut off sooner. And then the last thing I want to show you in this live demo is our coolest room, which is Wilburn, that has an AV over IP system. And we've actually connected the navigator to the Pepperdine network as well. So essentially what I'm saying is that we can get a live video feed of all the endpoints in that room. So there we go. So we have the live video feed on the right. So I'll prove it to you that it's real. I'll turn off the lights, then we'll see it turn off there. It's a little slow though. And that's it. Also lower the projector and such. And we can actually click through the endpoints. So most of them are going to be off right now, but as we turn on the system, the Blu-ray player should turn on. So if I can find that, where is that? I don't know where it went. Oh, I already selected it. So this room does take a long time to start up, so just give it a little bit of time. Okay, so it looks like it didn't turn on, actually, but it usually should. So this was essentially our workaround for not being allowed by our security team to put any cameras on the network whatsoever. This way we could still get the camera video feed to our office remotely while following their requirements, because we're following the video feed of the camera, but not the camera itself. That's still on an isolated network. And I'll just move it around there because I think that's cool. All right, well, that's all actually, I'll show you one more thing. There is an event log here, which I find is really useful. So every time an important event happens, it should put this in this log, which is actually persistent across all instances of the dashboard. So let's say, a room goes offline. We don't know why it went offline. We can actually compare the log of when it went offline to, let's say, a 25 live event, and we can find what happened. Maybe it was the cleaning person. Maybe there was a problematic user who likes to unplug the AV rack every time they go in there. So that's useful. That is something we've dealt with. Well, that's all I have for the live demo. Are there any questions before I move on to the technical hurdle section, or are we all set? All right. Move back to my PowerPoint. Okay. So actually, I forgot to put this in here. I put in a little bit of the version history of the original dashboard before I got into the technical hurdles. The first version of it was actually an incredibly simple system that I find is so funny, where it was just a line graph of the room usage. And that's just because I was trying to pull the GVE API to find useful information. So I graphed the rooms online, the online rooms, offline rooms, and the rooms that are in use. And that ended up being 2 lines that did not move, and then 1 line that moved a little bit, since we weren't looking at it in the context of a building or anything. It was like as a campus. But as I was building this, I was thinking that there has to be some useful way to use this information. So I'll go through the next versions. The next one, I tried to graph it by the campus, just trying to put this in a way that would be useful for our team. You can see on the bottom here, I'm actually starting to build the tiles that would eventually become the dashboard view. And here you can click on it, and you can see the room status and the device status. And this is before I got the touch panel auto login sequence figured out. So on the bottom, you can see there's an Open Controller website button there, which literally just opened the IP of the controller in an external browser. So it was still your responsibility to log in, and it was a slow process. Here I tried to mess around with the bar graph, still not very useful. And then here we get to the dashboard. So originally it just showed in use versus not in use, not very useful. I eventually added in pictures, seeing if that would be helpful. I removed it later. It wasn't very useful. And then here is when I start integrating the 25 live data into the tiles. You can see it's the same scheme that I had earlier, where blue is in scheduled but no AV in use, and so forth. And I also put in the scheduled event title into the tile, which is a feature that I thought it might be useful, but in the end I removed it just because it was too small, and usually the titles are incredibly long. And then I have a little video here of the first version that had the auto login sequence, which didn't work very well, but it kind of gets there. Sometimes. You can see it was an earlier version where it was inconsistent. The idea was if it's embedded into the application, it would be a lot faster of a process than jumping to an outside browser and then remembering the password and logging in yourself. So there we go. So it did it. It's not the best. And then the next version is when it got a little bit smoother. I added in just a little black image to hide the auto login process to give you the illusion that it's a smooth process. And there it goes. And it's a live connection as it was before. And then version 35, this is when I added in the device issue tracking. So this is the connection issues that I was talking about earlier. I did have to adjust the logic. There was when I built in this feature, we have Blu-ray players in just about every AV system, and they all do not report their connectivity status, but they were configured in a way where they were always reporting as disconnected, which is not always accurate. So I had to go in and reprogram all these rooms so that it would no longer be reporting as offline. So there are a lot of devices like that just simply could not report their connection status, that we would have to reprogram their GVE settings to not report anything at all to avoid the false negatives. And I also added an event log, but at this time it was only persistent for as long as you had the application open. So what I mean by that is when you open the application, there's no log, and as events happen, the log would populate. But if you restarted the application, if you restart the application, then you would lose everything, which was obviously not very useful. So that was a change I made later on. Version 50, I finally gave up on the graphs. So it was originally called the GVE graph, but I renamed it here to the AVT dashboard. And I started tracking it as version 1, and so forth. So for the technical hurdles, this project was putting a lot of pieces together that weren't really intended to be put together. So one of these issues were the room IDs. So GVE, in their API, they use an internal number as the room ID, which, it's just an integer. Essentially, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. But we don't use that, obviously, to mentally keep track of what the numbers are. So they use the room ID 89 per se, but then we have to use a different API call to match the room ID to the name that we gave it in GVE, which is another step. You can see right here, there's the device's query. It says room ID 89. This is for the devices. So if we want to get the device connection status, we do the device's query. Then we get the room ID. Then we have to do another query for the room's query to associate that ID with the human readable name. And then on top of that, there's the 25 Live API, which uses the formal name to associate, to keep track of every location. So I had to match the room ID to I forget what they call it, to the room name, to the 25 Live formal name. And the formal name is, I have a slide later on where they're not exactly, they follow a strange format. Initially, if they were consistent, the GVE ID would be just like a number. That is consistent. The GVE room name would be our building abbreviation, and then the room, and then 25 Live is the same thing, but with no spaces, if it was consistent. But it is not. So, for example, there is, to show the format, we have the room KSC 222A. That room does not have AV, so it's not on GVE. But on 25 Live, it would be KSC 222A with no spaces or anything. But if you go down to the third list there, we have TAC 160A. For whatever reason, the person on 25 Live decided to put a dash in there. So it's a completely unique format for a room with AV that we just have to add in a permanent, hard-coded translation mapping. And there are many rooms like this, such as if we go down to EA194, that is the technical correct name for our Elkins. So it's EA for Elkins Auditorium, that's the building. 194 is the room name. In 25 Live, it is just Elkins in all caps. And then there's another room, TAC 303, that's a conference room. It's on the 3rd floor. Its correct name is, the Thornton Administration Building, room 303. But on 25 Live, the formal name includes the aliased common, I'm not sure what the right term for it. I use the term aliases as I programmed this, where it includes the, how do I phrase this? Just like a human readable name. Like there are a lot of rooms that have a popular name. So instead of the formal name that isn't very, I guess not very attractive to the humans, it might use the formal name, then a secret hidden name such as the Fireside Room or Elkins or the Seaver Boardroom. So all of those rooms I had to put in a unique thing. Did you have a question? No, I didn't. We have just one person in charge of 25 Live, and they are not, I don't think they're notorious for not being receptive, but I just had my doubts that they would not be willing to change it. And just looking through 25 Live, you could see what the theoretical correct format would be, which would be the formal name with no spaces. But then there are just the exceptions, which is maybe 50 rooms out of the 1,000 rooms that we have at Pepperdine. So I don't know. The solution to that maybe would have been to ask them to rename them properly, but I'm not sure that's something they would have done. Because after the fact, I don't know, 25 Live is a very rigid thing that we don't have a lot of play with. Any other questions? Okay. So, and then the other thing here is that there are certain rooms that do not exist on 25 Live. And I believe the justification for that is 25 Live is used for rooms that, in theory, should be bookable to anyone from Pepperdine. And there are certain executive spaces that they don't want it to be bookable to anyone. So they use their own system. They use their own private Google Calendar that we don't have access to hold in the schedule for those rooms. So for those rooms, I just had to make sure that when I'm programming this, it can account for the room simply just not existing in the data in the scheduling service. So we'll never know if there's a scheduled event or not a scheduled event there. We just, with our institution, we don't have that information. Oh yeah, and here's the result. It's just for that timeline there, and just for I'll go back a bunch here, and for that key there, where we can see scheduled, not scheduled, in use, etc. And then, okay, so this is, I'm getting around to how I put in the embedded touch panel and also confidence view into when you click on a button. That was actually built using a tool built by Volt Projects called the Unity Web Browser. So my AVT dashboard was built in Unity, not for any particular reason. It was a side project initially from another project that had a reason to be in Unity. But the Unity Web Browser allows me to have an embedded browser that I can inject JavaScript into. So that means that I could actually have it in the application, and the auto login sequence can be fully automated with no input from the user. So there are a couple steps to this. First of all, none of our rooms have SSL certificates, so you need to click past this warning. Just for context, the Unity web browser uses the Chrome embedded framework. So essentially, it's a mini Chrome browser running inside Unity. So this is the same thing you would see if you open the link just on your regular Chrome browser. So this is something you have to physically click through, and then you get to the Extron login page, then you're on the main page, and then you have to go to Extron control and click on the right touch panel. So there are a couple steps there, and I just had to code in the steps one by one, and luckily you can actually track what step you're on by the URL that you get in the browser. And I did the same thing essentially for the confidence preview from our AV over IP system, where it just auto logs in and it tracks the URLs. Oh, it's so we are connecting to the controller of the system and not necessarily the touch panel. And it's something. It's just using the whatever credentials that controller does have. So it's occluded in a way where the person using the dashboard does not have to worry about that. It's something that's just handled by the application. I think I have seen that before. You can get like the touch panel control UI where you click into it.
Well, it'll bring it up, but going to the tab tool about I can say that will let you generate for that and stuff. But you can learn like I use it like for example, where I use that like control and it generates API code and everything so you can display them not logging
That's not something I've messed with. Oh, sure. That'd be great. What comes to mind is I know you can like adjust the tool belt URL in the GC file. Is that the same thing at all, or is that something else? Okay. Sure thing. Okay, so then, I mean, that's it. There's just a couple steps to the auto login. And this is all just to get a faster process to get the touch panel. rather than relying on GVE, which sometimes requires a couple steps of navigating. And then, so here in this data sync section, I'm talking about the event log. Earlier I said initially it was only persistent for the instance that you were running of the AVT dashboard. So again, when you start it up, you have no logs. And if you restart it, you lose all your logs. So that has several issues. I have some bullet points here, but I mean, I think you understand how that's not useful information if you start up the system and you see nothing. You have no historical information. And then the solution was actually I set up an apps script project. This is Google Apps Script that allowed me to have essentially one of the instances will act as a host, and it will upload all the logs that it gets, everything that it sees, onto a Google Sheet, and then every other instance is a client to that host, and it pulls data instead. So it was just a simple way to get like a simple database going, so that when you start up the application, you get the full, complete event log that all the instances ever saw. These nowadays we're running like 3 or 4 instances of these across the university. So yeah, that's useful information. And also, since we're now uploading it to Google Sheets, that means that if we set it up right, I was able to set it up to have all the data from GVE and 25 Live available just outside of the Pepperdine network. So that allows me to create the AVT Dashboard Lite, which is a simpler web version that just gives us that simple dashboard view along with the room status. And it follows a simpler logic, so it'll show a different list of device connection issues based off of it lacks some exceptions that were coded into the application version. But it's a simple workaround. It works on the phone if you just want to look really quickly. Hey, I'm wandering around campus and I want to see if this room that I'm about to walk in has any issues. And that's it. All right, so at this point, I'm out of talking points. Do you have any questions? Yeah. Oh, I actually forget this. I think it's 1.5. I can just see it right here. 1.5.1. So there's not really a specific reason behind the version numbering. It's just every time I update it, and it's an update worthy of being built into an application and set up on our TV in our office, then I would give it a little bit of a number. And of course, the second number on the version number is whenever there's an update that has a major change. I think the last major update was this confidence preview for our AV over IP system, where I tried to code it in a way where it, in theory, should be scalable and work as we get more navigators onto our network. Yeah.
I obviously want to know how easy you think this would be to transfer to another university. What steps do you think would be difficult for this one? We're full on Extron, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think you would need GVE on your institution. But then once that is there, I think it should be actually fairly simple to get something like this working. This is a project that took several months to get working to where it is now. But it was a project where there was not a clear direction. I started just building a line graph, and I just tried to adjust it to what could be useful. So if you were going into it knowing what you wanted it to do, I'm sure it would be a far quicker project. And of course, it depends on your scheduling service. 25 Live was kind of weird at times to work with. Just a small fun fact is that our API to 25 Live only shows us the next 24 hours of information. So we can't look into the future very far. If you're using a similar service, it could be easier, or I'm not sure. You have a question?
So you said that your network devices are isolated within the room, but I saw that you had the stats for like the projector hours on off-premise. How did you integrate all of the offline devices into this dashboard?
Yes, so that is a feature. It's a way that the Extron systems work, where on every controller that we buy is a dual network adapter controller. So they have a LAN port and an AV LAN port. So we're only connecting the LAN port to the Pepperdine network, and the AV LAN network is isolated to that room only. But the control processor is reporting the connection status for all the rooms in its program file. So that's how we get the data. Yep. The main advantage right now is just the embedded browser. So if we were purely wanting to get this dashboard view on the front, well, there are some limitations. So all of our API calls are only accessible on the Pepperdine network. So I can only access it now because I'm on the VPN. So you would need some system to upload that. And if you were to do a web-based option, you would need to make sure you have some way to get that data to maybe have a local server running that web-based, like a website. That would work if it's in your like local institution's network. Or I don't know how like every network would be configured. But just for us, it originally had to be a desktop application because the API calls are only accessible in the network. And then the light version was something I just built in after the fact as a little bonus, but it only works if there is a desktop version running at the same time. Yep. Oh yeah, so I forget off the top of my head how often we query our APIs. I think it's every minute. But I've noticed in the GV API, if a full room goes offline, so that's the control processor, if that's offline, we'll know in about 3 minutes. But if a device goes offline, we should know basically right away. We should know in like a minute 30 seconds. But there was a little bit of an issue with, I forget the technical term of maybe it's flopping, where there could be a device that went offline for half a second, and then we would get an alert that it went offline. And that's not really useful in the sense that if it went offline for half a second, it's not really an issue. So I did code in a little bit of a delay into this so that an issue is only considered real unless it exists for 2 minutes, or I forget the exact number, if it exists persistently through some API calls. Yeah. Yeah, this all works directly without a technical server. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so it's the three services then. It's Google, yeah, GV, 25 Live. So it's every instance does those calls itself, and they all do it equally, even if they're a host or a client. And the only thing that matters between the host and client is whether it's pushing or pulling from the log data from the Google Sheet. Any other questions? No. I use Gemini pretty heavily. That's what our institution uses. We have a license where Google does not train their data based off of our use of Gemini, so we were approved to use it even with sensitive information. So that's what I use entirely for this. So that's what we use. I think I did mess with Claude Code briefly, or maybe not Claude Code the desktop version, but Claude on the website. But I don't know, it didn't work. It wasn't my kind of style. Yep. Yes. So during COVID, we installed cameras into just about every classroom in every AV system. But the way these cameras work is it's a security concern if they were to be on the network, because they cannot talk to the Extron system for like touch screen controls using a secure format. So with these specific Panasonic cameras, they use HTTP, which our security guys found. There was a project where I was proposing, well, let's put all these cameras on the network so we can see what's going on. But it was denied in the end just because it was not doing it in a secure way. If we had different cameras, that story might have been different. It's just the cameras that we happen to have installed. Yeah. I have not. I think it might be more of an Extron issue, because I know those cameras do support HTTPS, but with the way we would have to set it up, currently the cameras are controlled via the classroom PC, where the user clicks on the link to that camera, which is completely isolated. and then they can control it with that camera's web interface. And that only works because the camera, I forget where I'm going with this here, but if we were to connect to the network, we would have to remove it to hide the IP of the camera, since that would be accessible from anywhere, and we would need to harden the security on it. So that means we'd have to move the controls to the Extron system. And the Extron driver only supports HTTP and not HTTPS. So that could be an Extron driver issue, that could be a camera issue, I'm not sure. I haven't talked to either party. All right. Any other questions? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think I first started tracking a lot more than I should. I did the initial version of this also tracked projector lamp hours, for example, and we also got alerts for when lamp hours were too high. And that of course ended up with there being a million alerts where it's not really useful information. I'm not sure there was not really a methodical approach to it. It was just the thought of, okay, that's not useful information. Let's just get rid of the projector lamp hours, and then we'll only track disconnection issues because we know that's an issue every time that happens. Once I had reprogrammed all the rooms to not be giving us false negatives. And one thing that I did not mention is we do track the firmware of the controller. That's the one firmware we do track with this. I'm not sure that was very useful information, but it was useful just for the initial release of this. Because depending on the firmware, the web interface of the controller, which we do the auto login sequence for, would be different. So it wouldn't always work if it was on an older firmware. So we did track those, and we updated all the firmwares, and now it works for every single one. So in conclusion, I would say the issues that we do track and are useful are probably just firmware and the connection status. Yep. Mm-hmm. 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 The firmware report I'm not sure about, but with lamp hours, for example, GVE actually has a built-in reporting feature. So that's something we've done before where we made a PDF of the lamp hours organized from highest lamp hours to lowest, and we went through all the high lamp hour rooms and made sure they were okay. So yeah, the reporting is just built into GVE. All right, anything else? All right, well, thank you all for coming to my presentation. It was really fun to show this to you. This is a project that was really fun for me. Thank you.